Well, hello everyone. Thank you guys for joining our office hour. It is office hour number 34. I can't believe how long these have been going. So thank you guys for the success, great feedback and attendance and all the good stuff and more to help keep these going on. This is all about ATF, best practices. We're going to cover some typical use cases and also do some extra ones that you may not have thought about. So you're in the right place if that's what you want to hear. Just to kind of go over a little bit about the office hour format. The first 30 minutes is all about hearing from our senior subject matter experts, which we have Lisa as well as Daniel invited to talk to us about ATF today. And then as they go through the presentation or demonstration, et cetera, they're going to cover around ATF. Feel free to ask questions within the chat window. I'll ask them to take a pause, or they'll be able to take a look at that and they'll try to answer that as they go through. The remaining 30 minutes is all about questions directly fielded from you guys as customers as well. So I hope you guys enjoy this office hour, as well as if for those that are watching the video, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us via the community page where these office hours are posted and ask whatever questions you have. I'll try to respond to those or get responses as we push along from there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lisa. And then Lisa, if you want to say a little bit about yourself or introduce Daniel as well, it's up to you.
Yeah,
The ball
sure.
is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, my name is Lisa Hohenstein. I'm a senior platform outbound product manager. I'm located in Germany. My colleague Daniel will be with us in just a second. Charles asked us to join this session and tell you more about ATF and how to leverage it for upgrades and ServiceNow use cases, as well as some best practices. Just as a teaser right now, but I will tell you a little bit more about it later. We are starting a new academy that is about platform foundation topics. This one will start next week. And we'll cover topics like ATF or also instance scan, source control, CI/CD, all kinds of topics that are baseline platform topics. And we'll also cooperate more with the developer advocates and do some more technical sessions on ATF on the Creator Toolbox with Brad and Chuck. We are lucky to have Andrew Barnes join us for in our team, so some seasoned developer advocates right there. He will be also presenting some of those Academy sessions. All right, so before we continue, you all know the safe harbor slides. Probably if I make any statements about coming or future products or release dates or whatever, please don't make any purchasing decision based on what I tell you today here. We will speak a little bit about ourselves. I hope that Daniel will join as soon as possible. And then we'll tell you some more things about automated test framework, what is new in ATF, some good practices, and then we'll head over to top takeaways and of course the Q&As part. My name is Lisa, as I said. I've joined ServiceNow in February 2019. I was part of the ecosystem before. I was the platform owner, service owner, and developer at a customer here in Germany for about 2.5 years before that. I joined as a solution consultant working with different customers in Germany, and then I switched jobs and am part of the Creator Workflows outbound product management team right now. We cover all kinds of topics like having our customers be successful with our products, that be that top customers or at scale. And that is one of the reasons why I'm here. We're trying to scale the knowledge and teach as many people as possible about automated test framework. My colleague Daniel worked in customer outcomes before joining the outbound product management team. He's been at ServiceNow for way longer than I have. He may tell us later, I think like 2016, 2014. He's been around for a while. And with that, I am going to start with ATF and tell you a little bit about why you should consider automated testing. Automated testing is, of course, an investment to make. To get started, you need to create a lot of tests and think about what kind of tests you want to do. But the benefits are way higher. Once you get started, you can do automated testing, and you can save up to 43% of the times and resources spent on upgrades. Customer test frameworks are regularly broken, or, well, it's not hope regularly, but if there are major upgrades or UI changes, you'll want to test that thoroughly. And also, many customers do not use any automated tested. They do manual testing. Oftentimes, they don't even have any test scenarios written down or documented or expected outcomes of their products. And we have customers who tell us that their last major upgrade took 13 weeks. And then starting to use ATF, you can save a lot of that time. It is an upfront investment. You will have to consider creating the tests alongside your development or before starting into your next upgrade, but you will save that within the next 2 or 3 release cycles. So what is ATF? ATF allows for mostly no-code testing. It was designed for both technical and non-technical users. Scripting is supported for complex tests, so you can create your own custom test steps, but overall ATF was targeted as a no-code or low-code solution. You can get organized with test suites. That means you can create reusable testing plans to reduce the manual efforts. Whenever a test is finished, the test data will be rolled back. So you don't clutter your dev instance or test instance with hundreds and hundreds of test records. You can develop the tests then based on reliable best practices. And then, of course, we have a huge, huge library of quick start tests. So make sure you go check out all of the test templates that are available for install in your plugin list. All of them are documented in our product documentation. You will get the link when you get this presentation. There are over 500 quick start tests that you can copy and then just adjust to your own implementation. ATF will also help you to reduce the overhead. So providing coverage for most manual test cases reduces the number of people involved with testing. Regression testing can then be run by a single system administrator who doesn't need any specific business process expertise. There's no additional tools or software required to use ATF. It is also fast, so reducing ServiceNow upgrade cycles with ATF is a big, big plus. You can accelerate the time to production for your custom apps, and of course, avoid inconsistent and common user testing errors, because as we all know, if people are involved and they do the testing manually, they're bound to make mistakes, and that will skew your test results. What are the goals of automated testing? It's not very feasible to attempt to reach 100% test coverage. That's probably not going to happen. But many of our customers report that they can cover about 70 to 90% of their existing manual tests to cover those with automated testing. And the great thing is you can run those tests again and again and again. You can use that and run those tests as often as you like. You can use that for regression testing, for upgrades. You can use it before deploying your application, your custom apps to your prod instances, and so on. And the great thing is that the ATF makes it framework UI independent. So you can test whether that's on a Chrome or Opera or whatever other browser. And you can also do server-side testing, so you're not even depending on any UI. And of course, you prevent user errors. So what do we say? When should you use ATF? When should you not use ATF? We recommend to use ATF not, let me back up. We recommend to not use ATF on your production instance. So people always ask why ATF should only be run on non-prods. And we say it's not a hard and fast rule. The idea is that running tests on your prod instance could create and remove records which could confuse your users. So don't do that, and it may impact your instance. There's a word missing in my brain. It can reduce the performance, of course. So it is recommended to always only do that on non-prod instances. However, we highly recommend that you promote your tests and test suites to prod, for example, through update sets to retain them for cloning down from prod to dev or test instances. We recommend to use ATF for functional testing of business logic, for browser compatibility testing, and of course, as I said before, regression testing. It can also be integrated with Jasmine for specific server-side test steps. In addition to not using ATF on your production instance, we also do not recommend for you to test every single UI component. This goes specifically towards all of the out-of-the-box components. So we as ServiceNow, we do a lot of testing ourselves. We test our interfaces, our components, our logic, our flows, whatever. So you don't need to test what is there out of the box with ATF, aside from the quick start tests that we provide. We recommend that you go ahead and test anything that is specific to your instance. So whenever you have done a configuration or a customization to one of the out-of-the-box products, or you have created your own custom apps, that's a good place to start for ATF. And then lastly, ATF is not a load testing or performance testing application. That's just not what it's designed to do. And if you need assistance with load balancers or whatever questions, support is the way to go. All right, let's see. We have some more info. So what has been new in ATF? We are striving to deliver continuous and customer-driven innovation when it comes to ATF. I know that this slide is very small, but that just goes to show that there are a lot of new, have been a lot of new features in the past releases. Some things that I want to highlight, and we will also go through in our next sessions in the Academy and Creator Toolbox, are things like custom UI testing. This also covers parts of Service Portal, for example. We have added list and related list testing. We have also expanded the quick start tests and added options to use a page inspector for custom UI testing, and also parallel test suite running. So your suites can run next to each other. This greatly reduces the runtime of a set of suites. And then lastly, in Quebec, we added some more custom UI support, some reference picker support, and also improvements to the copy test and test suite actions. Our focus at the moment, so the highest priority that we see in our development is the coverage of workspaces and the new Now experience framework. So expect that to be a primary focus on for the next releases. And whenever the restrictions for Roam are lifted, brace yourselves for another goodie. I cannot speak too much about it, but it's a really neat feature that will make testing a lot easier in the future. All right. I don't know if there are any questions so far. I can see there's something there's something in the chat. Kevin is just very optimistic excited about it. That's so awesome. Thank you, Kevin. All right, let's go. I think Daniel may be there soon. So
there's a question that just popped in there, Lisa. Awesome. It's from Vandana. If you want to Vandana, if you want to come off of mute, you can go ahead and ask that question. I'll ask it for you then if you're having a little troubles. Is it possible to copy test steps from one test case to another in Quebec?
Not as far as I'm aware. So the copying of the tests is that you copy a whole test or test suite. So it would copy all of the things. I don't think you can copy them to another test. However, you can create test templates, which might be an idea for your use case. So if you create a test template from one of your tests and add the template to the other test, that might just solve the question that you have.
And then Kevin has one, mutual and exclusive parameters are also helpful.
That is
Okay.
That is right. So if you're diving into parameterized testing, this is a feature that we have also added in the last 2 releases, as far as I know. What parameterized testing does, and it is a tongue twister, is that you can define a set of data, like variables, in the that will be used for different run-throughs of the same test steps. So for example, if you have a catalog item that you want to test with different variable parameters, you can define a set of parameters to go through, like different scenarios. Does the user click yes or no? Does he pick one option or the other? And then add those as parameters for the different tests. And then you only have to define the test steps once, but run through each of the scenarios. So that might also be helpful for your use case. All right. It's all good. Thanks for the question. Okay, so let's start. Let's go over some of the good practices that we see for automated testing. First of all, there are roles, and you should assign the appropriate roles to the different people that are involved in creating tests and test suites. We have, for example, the pro coder persona, a low and no coder persona. The pro coder will usually have ATF admin permissions. They're the ones that can activate or deactivate testing on a given instance. They can create test templates and also custom step config. Also, a pro coder would be the web service tester. They can use and build REST web service tests and also give access to other web service modules. And then the majority of test design will be test designers. They're the ones who are building the tests, creating test suites, run them, and also use the client test runner. Those are not necessarily developers. They can also be part of a testing team and have some knowledge about how to go about testing or which kind of tests you need to create the greatest coverage of all of the test scenarios. To give you a somewhat of an overview, and this will maybe also already answer some of the questions that we often hear. How do test suites run? Test suites can be can have other test suites as parents. And then within a given test suite, we have multiple tests. This can actually also branch. So you can have one test suite that includes another test suite and 3 other tests. Or we have one test suite that includes 5 other tests and so on. The most important part to know here is we recommend for you to create a user in the beginning and impersonate that. That is very important because you want to run your tests in the right context, with the right roles, with the right permissions. Then you have your test steps, and at the end of each step, the test will automatically be unimpersonated, and all of the data will be rolled back. This also means that currently you cannot pass variables between tests. And I can see that Daniel is back, and maybe Daniel will continue and pick up.
Hey, Lisa, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry for that delay here for me joining, and welcome everyone. I think you did a great job there.
I've done this before, you know.
Yeah, I know. So, hence, I was all good in knowing that you would take over here. As you want, I can jump in, or you want to continue on that slide.
I think this slide is mostly done. If you want to, you can pick up the next best practices.
All right, so you will just click on forward. Okay, thank you. So as for this session today, we wanted to focus a bit on our best practice guidance advice that we give you on the kind of organizational management piece around it, not so much going into the technical session. I'm pretty sure Lisa teased you our ATF or Platform Academy that's slot next week, where we'll get into more details. But a few points that just make sense from what we have gathered in the experience with the customers is when you start embarking on ATF and want to have automated testings, you should start, like with every other project, with designing them. Have a plan. What do you want to test actually, right? How detailed should that be? If you take incident, for example, do you really need to go in on an incident form and check each and every field that's on that form? Or are you actually testing the process, just the really important fields that you need, like a status field, maybe category as you need it for driving assignment groups or business services or whatever you use, right? The process critical fields, that's what we would recommend. Focus on these. That's the one that makes sure that your process runs. If a secondary level field is maybe not behaving as it should, that might not be as critical. So have a plan what you will test, how you maintain your tests as you go forward. Your processes will probably evolve over time. So make sure you have somebody maintaining that as you go forward. As you implement ATFs or add tests to your setup, you will probably find certain things that you cannot test the way that they are today. An example might be if you use alert messages where you have a pop-up coming to user say, do you really want to continue? Yes, no, the classical NAC dialogues that people just click OK. Right? If you use for them a browser feature like an alert or a dialog message, these dialogues cannot be tested from ATF as they are not happening within the ServiceNow framework. They just happen in the browser side. So we can't test for them. If you use our APIs to present such a dialogue like a glide modal, then we can very well test them. So if you see such a scenario, the question is, what do? Do you accept that you can't test that feature? Or do you want to rewrite your feature to make it testable? Right? So these are decisions you probably need to think about how to approach them. In terms of the tests themselves, as you've seen in the previous slide, a test suite can have multiple tests, and these tests have steps in there. We have seen some customers trying to make it end-to-end process test in one go. And that might be like requesting something from a service catalog, approving it, raising tasks to fulfillment teams, maybe even orchestrating some automation to backend system, that all within one test. Yes, this is possible, but it is a very lengthy test. It takes a long time to do it. And if something breaks, it'll be difficult to troubleshoot. As you have a long test, it will just fail somewhere in the middle, say, I couldn't do that. And then you'll need to kind of trial and error and go through that and try to fix it. So our experience is it's way easier if you keep your tests short and simple, very bespoke. Coming back to that scenario, break that down into pieces. One test could be ordering something from a catalog. If you can order one item, you probably can order all the others, right? Another test might be approving a request. It doesn't matter which one, but it's a separate test. It's not within one test. And the third one might be testing your assignment rules or assignment engine, right? Break in kind of that way, just break them down into smaller, more manageable pieces. It's kind of around the designing how you do that. And then as you execute your tests or as you design your tests, think about what's happening on a client side in the browser window and what can happen on a server side in a dark mode, let's say, right? What is backend? Quite oftenly, we see customers doing a lot of client side, very heavy client side testing. And I say heavy because the client side is just slower than a server, right? It needs to run the browser, it needs to render the pages and have server client round trips to get the content and things like that. So that's taking a lot of time. If you can move as much as possible of these tests towards server side, coming back to that service request, for example, if you test one example on a client side, that's probably good enough. If you have 5 variants of the same thing you want to test, well, the other 4 could be running just server side, right? The client rendered fine the first time, so why should it be different the next 4? So think about how you can split server and client side testing for the sake of performance. And the last one on that slide, testing for outcomes, not for configuration, is something we have also seen on customers. And what do I mean by that? An example I've seen that comes to head is a customer called me once saying, hey, I want to test my SLA, my service level agreements, right? Priority 1, 2, 3, how long do they take? And I want to read the definition of the SLA record and the condition field there to make sure it's entered properly. And like, well, but I can't get that field. How can I get to that field? And I said, well, actually, what you want to test is raise an incident and just make sure that the SLA you are expecting is attached to the incident record. You're not worried about the configuration screen of the SLA. That's not what users see. Users see the SLA being created or not. So that's the part you want to test. Test the outcome, not the configuration. And please interrupt and pose questions as I speak if you have any on that, right? Otherwise, I'll just might be rambling on here. So yeah, that's kind of the major pillars and pieces that we have seen in terms of designing tests that we would recommend. If you want to move forward, Lisa.
On it. Or?
Okay.
Or?
Pardon?
One more, I think. You don't want the...
Yeah, you're waiting for the parallel testing, right? So when you can, and yeah, it wasn't there in the previous slides, but as we get to the takeaways, think about how you can parallelize your tests, right? Executing each test one after another in a sequential manner can take a long time, and we have customers running tests for multiple hours doing that, right? So if you can parallelize these testings, and you can do that by having multiple tests in a suite and run them in parallel, unless you use that mutual exclusive, right, that we just had in the chat there from Kevin a few minutes ago, where you can say, well, we can run parallel. We actually need to run in a sequence, but you can do that. It helps to have them run in parallel. So in terms of wrapping that up and getting towards the Q&A part, we believe ATF is the tool to choose for ServiceNow testing on ServiceNow, right? It is free for you. It's there in the platform anyway. We deliver quick starts tests we can talk about. So it should really speed up your implementation, and it should increase your quality and upgrade cycles, right? So that you can manage much quicker to upgrade to newer releases and having less risk doing so. We also see, as a takeaway, create these tests as you do your implementation. Don't see creating tests as an aftermath that comes at the end when the implementation is complete. We see also, and there will be a session soon in, I think it's in the Creator Toolbox or where's that, and I can check the link, in test-driven development on ServiceNow, right? Start with the test in mind. Ideally, you would basically create your test case first, it fails, and then you start building the code and configuration on the back of it to make your test pass. That would be kind of the test-driven development. That doesn't work always in ServiceNow, right? If you want to test creating a record, you need to have the table first and things like that. But at least have testing in mind as for your developers as they develop their configuration or implement things on ServiceNow. It is a certain mindset shift, right? But as you approach that, or as your team approaches that, what we hear, what we see is that after adopting that, they actually get faster because they think differently and they produce more quality in the first sprint or in the first release of what they do.
One more thing that I would recommend at this point is a lot of you are probably working very closely with partners, implementation partners, or also partners developing for you. Make ATF tests and test suites part of the deliverables. So talk with your partners, talk with your developers that are delivering for you, any service providers that are helping you keeping your instance up or upgraded, or are creating custom apps for you. Speak with them and make sure that testing and test suites are part of the bill of materials. And that will help you keep your instance a lot cleaner than just creating those tests at the end of anything, or just never getting around to it.
All right, yeah, thanks. And I think with that, we move towards Q&A, right? That would be our next slide.
Let's plug our Academy once more.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of sessions already lined out. We're doing a general introduction and really at the first initial presentation on July 8th. That'll be Andrew Barnes presenting what was new in Quebec for the Now platform. So this is not just ATF, but all kinds of topics. Then we'll dive into more best and good practices with Daniel on July 22nd. And then on August 5, I will take a deep dive and check out what kinds of tests are available for quick start tests. How do you get started using them? How do you make a copy, adjust them for your own use case, and then get running with those. The session will be linked in the description. There's also a post on the community page, so make sure you register for those. It's also a webinar, so you will have to sign up for each session individually. But I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you in there. And then it's time for Q&A.
Awesome. All right. First question from Byron. Are there any plans to link ATF and test management? I know there were some challenges with using them both with different environments.
That is one of our top questions. We hear that all the time. I'm pretty sure there's a community idea for that out there. If there is, make sure to give it an upvote. We're constantly passing on comments and questions that we get from customers to our inbound people, to our developers and engineers, and that is one of the top asks. I sadly cannot tell you any plans or any.
I think, and that's the pity on that. To be fair and open and honest there, right? At this moment in time, I don't think there are any concrete plans to do so. We hear that request quite a few times. I agree, and go into the community, upload there for sure. That helps, as that's the customer voice, not just ours, right? But on the one side, it sounds very simple. It's on one platform. It's just a few records left and right. But the difficulty, and then you pointed out there, Byron, is the environment. Where would your ATF run? Where would your test management be on prod, right? And then you need to trigger the ATF somewhere else. So you can all do that. There are APIs around to start remotely an ATF run and things like that. But at this moment in time, we don't have that as a baseline feature. It is a custom implementation.
And also one more thing to consider is that test management is part of the ITBM suite, and not all of our customers have access to that. You probably have, not all other customers that use ATF do. More questions?
Great. Yeah, other questions? Well, I know I'm very excited about the upcoming webinar, so go ahead.
Hi, Charles. Sorry, I was just typing away and I thought I might just come off mute and ask.
No, go for it.
So thanks for that answer to that last question. Thank you. So just something about Upgrade Center. So the Upgrade Center that's been introduced, I think, in Paris. So I see that you can access ATF results there. Is there anything specific that needs to happen to ensure the connection there? Or if you create ATF suites and so on and run them, they automatically appear in the Upgrade Center? Does anyone know?
That is a good question. I personally haven't done that yet.
Me neither, I have to say. I'm just thinking about, no, I haven't seen that and haven't done that yet. I'm sorry.
I'll have to take a note of that and find out, because that's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
May I raise a stupid question?
Go ahead. I don't think it's going to be stupid, but please go ahead.
I think it's going to be stupid because is there something like let's say a usual / common effort that's actually needs to be taken in consideration? You mentioned you should be doing it during the development, but I experienced in the past that it's kind of hard because you need to have the resources, because you need to have somebody working on test management, ITBM, yeah, working on ATFs, and if it's supposed to be the same person, they should be aligned for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And is there something like best practices? What you should schedule for that one? Is it something like a full-time job?
I wouldn't say that this is a stupid question, and not at all, right? It's actually a question that is not our number one question, but a question that comes up regularly in terms of how much effort is it to create test cases and do tests and build that. Actually, we have Sasha in here. If you want to chime in, that please help me, right? Yeah, I know you have your opinion there. Otherwise, I might recite you one way. So yes, typically for customers, when you look at your current state, right, and you have implemented it somewhere and you do not have the test cases yet, so you would consider there is a certain backlog that you would need to fill a gap, cover what you have done so far. But that's probably the issue that is questionable, as it takes quite some time to rethink what you have done and build the test cases around that for something that's already in production and running and probably behaving okay-ish, maybe good, maybe great, you don't know. So I think the approach to that would be, as you go forward for stuff that you newly build or add or extend, that's where you start building your test cases and get that in a regular working method for your people and your team, that they do that, as we said, as part of their development. Yes, initially it will take them a little longer, obviously, as they need to think about their tests and add these tests to what they do. But if they do it properly and get that into their daily habits or in their development habits, then we believe it will actually increase their speed as they produce better. Please help me, right? I think that is partly also what we discussed some while ago.
All right, this is what you mentioned regarding the mind shift that should take place in order to make it happen.
And we see customers basically in two profiles, right? Another question that comes around in that aspect is sometimes who is creating the test cases? Is that a dedicated test resource? I think you had that in your question as well, like a QA team, or is it the development team? And we see customers on both ends, basically. I guess there's no real right or wrong. I would actually say it depends also a little bit on how we test. I think a developer has to do tests anyhow for stuff he does, right? Most of the time he's doing it manually, clicking through GUIs, clicking through screens, running scripts to validate. He's doing testing anyway in one form or another. He's just not really documenting and writing it down in a test suite. And that, what a developer does is kind of, I would consider it unit testing or feature testing as he develops. And what a QA team would do is really more like having the overarching view of that. And building an end-to-end chain of different tests, kind of.
All right. Thank you very much for answering the question.
See, I thought it was a good question. No, it really is. It's one of the main questions that we get asked a lot. It is an effort, and it is hard, and it is a lot of time that goes into it, but it's so worth it because you don't have to do it manually anymore.
We also see once you have your tests, you run them way more often, right? Because they are automated. You can just click them and they run automatically within minutes, hours, whatever how many tests you run. But you do them way more often and having a more stable environment doing so.
So another good question by Sanjit. Can ATF be used to test APIs or integrations effectively? So there are a couple of options here. One of them is the REST test steps that I added, that I mentioned earlier. So the web tester is able to create or to simulate inbound REST messages for your ATF testing. And then, of course, there's the option of using integrations within Integration Hub. So whether when you're using your outbound integrations or calling APIs from a flow with Integration Hub, those will run and can be tested. At least you can test that the call has been generated or the flow has run or whatever. You can. It's not easy from ServiceNow to check whether that call has reached the outbound, the other system. You would need to have a different system to do that, I think. But you can definitely simulate inbound integrations, and you can check whether the call has been generated. Any additions to that?
No, that's great. I just think I believe, but don't quote me on that. Don't take my word. I believe I have seen that an inbound REST simulation step is on the roadmap, so that you could basically simulate an inbound call. But I would need to dig exactly when and where and how it looks like. But I believe I've seen that somewhere.
Great. Other questions? And feel free to take yourselves off mute right now, because I don't see any other questions inside the chat window.
Yeah, this is Sasha. Indeed, I do have that maybe special opinion even on relating to that question, how much effort it is to create automated tests. And the advice and the personal experience that I have is, no matter how you do it or how you think of it, but I think the idea of creating automated tests increases your effort in any form or shape is a myth. It reduces time. There is a small, let's say, time investment in the beginning for a team to adopt a new way of working, as you said. But as soon as it's a natural part of your development process, it is faster. Each developer will become more productive, will produce less defects, and will just work on more things in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
And that's happening quickly.
It is the return on invest will be seen quite quickly. It is an effort at the beginning, and it is also, I think, if you don't have any tests or test suites yet, it does make sense to set up a small project and plan resources and whatever to get you covered initially. But once you have a base set of test suites that cover the 70 to 90% that I mentioned earlier, you'll be set going forward. And every time you run those tests, every time you publish anything, or maybe use the CI/CD spokes to promote your code through source control and run tests automatically from there, or you want to go ahead and start using App Engine Studio and integrate automated testing into the publishing workflow right there, you can use the CI/CD spokes for that. Again, every time you run those automatically, it saves you time because nobody has to sit in front of the computer and click on all the buttons and fill out fields, and you're guaranteed to get the same result every time.
Just if I can add to that, as I see a question popping to sitting in front of the screen, right? I think, Vandana, you asked here, while executing a test case, is there a way if a screen can be made inactive and our execution can still run in the background? I think that refers to our client-side test runner when you do the client-side testing, right? If you do server-side testing, there's no need to wait on a screen. It all runs in the dark and it just executes against the server. That's great. As soon as we have that client side where you test the UI, at this moment in time, as of the Quebec release, yes, that window needs to be open, and ideally it's the active, the topmost window in your screen, because modern operating systems and browsers reduce priority if you put that window in the back. However, with the coming Rome release, we plan to deliver what we call a headless test runner. So you wouldn't need to have the window open. We would spin up that test runner in a Docker image somewhere in your data center, hopefully. And run the test and close that down once we're done. Then you would definitely not need to sit in front of the screen and wait for that window or see what's happening there. So that is on the roadmap. What also is on the roadmap, which kind of fits into that, if you have your tests running and maybe they produce an error and fail at a certain point, somewhere in between. Right now, it is difficult to figure out where they stop or what the reason was. Where you get an error message, but what was the reason? On the roadmap is what we call an ATF debugger. So you can set a breakpoint in a test and the test would just stop there and you can actually look what happened on the database. How does my data look like? Did I miss setting a field or did it not accept the field or something like that? So you can really stop, pause, and step through your test. That is also on the roadmap. Probably not Rome, probably the release after that.
This is so cool. This is so game changing. I love it.
Perfect. And there was another question too in the chat window. Is there any best practice for using the out-of-box test suites? Any best practices when they fail due to customizations?
So the out-of-the-box, the quick start tests, they're designed for you to create a copy and then adjust them to your customization. So you would actually use not the ones that are already there unless you haven't made any changes, but you just take them, copy them, add whatever customization is in your platform. So make sure that your instance at that moment is working as expected, as your customizations determine it to run. And when it does that, you adjust the test to as long as it takes to make the test be successful.
Yeah, I've been trying for that. It's just quite complicated. Once it fails, then it gets stuck, like it doesn't move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to like split it up or?
That is a good question.
I'm
Doesn't
sorry, my
move
son just
further.
bubbled in here, so I didn't get the question.
Like when you're, I'm mostly looking at the PPM module ATF, and it gets stuck at a particular point, probably due to customizations. How do you get that to run? Like, we have to like go back and change the test step, basically.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You make a copy of the quick start test, and then you make adjustments to the test steps according to your customizations.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
By the way, let's assume they did this, right? They made a lot of copies of existing quick start tests or created their own tests, you know, that are, I don't know, looking at the specifics of a specific process. So let's say we have 20, 30, 40 different tests that all starts with, we're creating an incident, and then something else happens. And at some point, someone decides, well, now we need an additional mandatory field when we create a new incident. And all of a sudden, 40 different test cases fail because that specific new mandatory field is not populated in all of the test cases. Right? So this is one of the real life scenarios that you might face, no matter whether you used the quick start test as a copy or whether you created your own, right? You might run into a situation where a simple or not so simple new customization breaks a lot of tests. And then you look at them, they all seem to be completely useless. Now there's one life hack that you can apply here, is to add additional, for example, additional business rules that modify records that are being created as part of the tests, but only those which are created as part of the test, and populate values that are needed or make changes to them in order to make the tests compatible to reality again without having to change every single test. So that can
Okay.
save a lot.
Yeah, that's a kind of. Okay. So making the business rule on which, like, can you explain that again?
Well, in that example, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
where you have like
Yeah.
40 different tests relying on being
The
able to
mandatory
create a
field.
new incident, right?
Mhm.
And now you create a new field on the incident table and say that field is now mandatory. And now all of the tests that try to create an incident fail because they're not configured in a way that in the test sequence this field is being populated. So in that case, you could create a new business rule on create or on insert for the incident table and say, well, if that field is not populated and I do see that the incident is being created as part of a test, then populate that mandatory field with the default value so that the existing tests can run through.
How do we know whether the incident is created as part of the test?
Well, if you're in a situation in which, like, you may have created a certain naming convention or a certain pattern in the short description or something like that, you could use this. As far as I know, there's even a way to determine whether a particular record has been created as part of a test. As Lisa mentioned, all of the test data that is being created or modified during a test is rolled back at the end of the test. So there is a table that stores all the changes that are being made as part of a test to which you have access from a business rule. So you could look at the sysid of that record, see if the sysid is part of it running test, and then, you know, behave differently as if it was a user that created the incident, for example.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
There's another
an-
question too.
Yes.
Does ATF support mobile UI testing? Oh, that's a very good question.
It is a very good question, but it sadly at the moment it does not. So the current mobile app that we have, the Now Mobile and Mobile Agent are not supported. I believe it's on the roadmap, but I cannot tell you for sure when it's going to be.
Great. We have about 6 minutes left. Any last minute questions? I'm going to, before we get into the last question, I'm going to launch our poll too. If you guys can go ahead and start submitting your answers to that, this helps us in trying to streamline these office hours and offer up others as well. Go ahead, Tapos, you can ask your question.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions on parallel testing. Number one is, when we do a parallel testing, would it be based on one particular suit? Can we, in one particular suit, if we have two test cases running parallelly, would it be recommended? Or it would be two different suits that we would run in parallel? Obviously, there's mutual exclusiveness in between these two suits. So what is more recommended? And secondly, what is the performance impact? Because you said there would be some performance impact when we execute ATF test cases, but what would, when we do a parallel execution, how would it impact the performance of an instance?
So as far as I know, it is more efficient to run them in parallel because just the duration of the impact would be shortened. And that is also why we recommend to run tests on subprod. So your dev or test instances or sandbox or whatever shouldn't impact users with tests running. For the first question, I believe it's within any test suite. So whether you group tests in one suite or you have several suites with multiple tests, whenever tests can run in parallel, they will run in parallel. I think there's an order field where you can choose in which order to run tests or test suites that are grouped. But whenever, except for the mutually exclusive test suites or tests, they will run in parallel. So this optimization is running by default. You don't have to opt for it. So it will run anything that can run in parallel will run in parallel.
Okay.
That is mostly for service steps, of course, because if you only have one open client test runner, it can only display one UI at a time.
That was my continuing question. So because we had a couple of client UI, and that would get impacted then.
I would imagine, I'm not sure how it's being done on a technical level once we get to headless browser testing, whether it would like launch multiple Docker instances. So it may just be possible that parallel testing for UI tests will be possible in the future.
Yeah, it will be possible. So you can basically configure how many of these you want to start at maximum.
That sounds amazing.
Kind of to think about how big is your instance, how much can it cope with how many users, right?
All right.
Or how many Docker images can you start up on your Docker environment? But yes, parallel testing on client side will be possible with that as well. I think our plan is right. Think about maybe 4, 5 to 10 maximum. If you want to really massively scale out the client side testing, that's something we should probably speak about and see the use case behind, because we don't want to have a load testing tool, right? It's not to simulate user load, still not.
Perfect. Awesome. That's awesome news. And you said that's coming in Rome, right?
Yeah.
Safe harbor applies, you know.
yeah. All right.
We cannot say exactly because it's not out yet.
Yeah.
It's not official.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right. We have 2 minutes left. Oh, we got a lot of good comments in the chat window. So great info, great session. Thank you so much. Good stuff. And I'm seeing a lot of good ratings as well as the poll. Any last minute questions, comments from both sides. Lisa, Daniel, from your side, any last minute comments you want to share to the team before we end?
I'll say thank you. Those were some great questions. Thank you so much.
Same here. Thank you for the active participation. And again, sorry for me being late, but we'll make it up with the Academy sessions.
Yes.
There we go. I think that's going to be a very hot ticket, and we'll definitely make sure that we'll publicize that with our other customers as well. So if you're listening to the video, there is a new academy that's going on for ATF. Be sure to attend that as well to get additional of your questions answered. And it's going to be a great session. So thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you so much, customers, for joining the call. And thank you guys for listening to this video as well. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Bye bye.